The Dark Moon Knights were once led by my elder brother, the Dark Sun Gwyndolin, but he was stricken by illness. Then Sulyvahn wrongfully proclaimed himself pontiff and took me prisoner. Oh, where could my dear brother be?
Hey there, my name is Alex. I am the Silvermont. Time for some Dark Souls lore, and in this video, one of the most highly requested and controversial characters from Dark Souls 3, the Supreme Pontiff of Irithyll, Sulyvahn. Despite seemingly nothing more than a boss we fight to little celebration around halfway through the game, it would appear that Sulyvahn's influence spreads far and wide. Just how far? Just how wide? Well, hopefully by the end of this video, we'll have some answers. And as usual, we'll start with his name. Actually, we'll start with his title. In-game, he is known as the Pontiff. The most simple way to look at that would be to say that a Pontiff is a bishop or pope. This is corroborated by Sulyvahn's title in Japanese, which is Pope. But the characters that make up his title can also be taken individually to mean Law Lord or King of the Laws, Lord of the Laws. Incidentally, Lords and Kings are often interchangeable in the Dark Souls setting in many ways. Take the Nameless King. In the Japanese version, he is the Nameless Lord, and so forth. For all intents and purposes, however, Sulyvahn has presumably granted himself a clerical title. Well, what does Sulyvahn mean? A different spelling of the name Sullivan, it seems to have its origin in Ireland and appears to have the meaning of little dark eye. And amusingly enough, we have two rings in the game referred to as Sullivan's Eyes, the Pontiff's right eye and left eye respectively, both of which are black. There's another, more tangential link here, Lord's Blade Kieran. One of the first lore videos I ever made was on Kieran, and her name is also Irish and means Little Dark One. That just struck me as entertaining but not entirely relevant, although we'll touch on a possible connection between the two later on. Who is Sulyvahn though? In a sentence, here's my take on him. A sorcerer posing as a holy man. But now for more detail. We actually know a fair deal about Sulyvahn, from birth to death. For starters, he was born and raised inside the Painted World, presumably of Ariandel, although the game never explicitly specifies. As a young sorcerer, Sulyvahn created at least two sorceries that we know of, Frozen Weapon and Snap Freeze. Still, Sulyvahn had little use for the Painted World, as he had yet to experience loss. As we know, the Painted World of Ariandel served as a home to those who had lost theirs. So upon leaving the Painted World through means unknown, where did Sulyvahn go next? There was a theory going around for a long time that Sulyvahn was the first of the scholars who took Lothric under his wing. Wherefore, it appears to be for two main reasons. There is a statue in the high wall that some believe represents Sulyvahn, and some think his robes are those of the scholars found in the archives. I have an entire video on this subject, so I won't delve too much into it here, other than to say that I don't personally believe Sulyvahn has anything to do with the Grand Archives, as the robes aren't actually the same, and I believe that statue represents Lothric. On the flip side, however, we do know that at some point Sulyvahn discovered the Profaned Capital. A ceremonial sword held in Pontiff Sulyvahn's right hand, representing the Profaned Flame. Long ago, when Sulyvahn was yet a young sorcerer, he discovered the Profaned Capital and an unfading flame beneath a distant tundra of Irithyll, and a burning ambition took root within him. We also know that in Dark Souls 3, Sulyvahn is the ruler of Irithyll, but the exact timeline is not certain, nor is it perhaps too important. Did Sulyvahn create the city of Irithyll after his discoveries in the Profaned Capital, or did he merely wrest control of the city at some point? The game suggests the latter. Either way, it would appear that Sulyvahn is very old indeed. To me, the game implies that he is older than Aldrich. The most likely scenario in my mind is that Irithyll existed before Sulyvahn, as the Twilight City of Anor Londo, with Gwyndolin still ruling over it. And from here, Sulyvahn either became a citizen of the city or invaded it after his discovery of the Profaned Flame. This seems to be the crucial moment though, the burning ambition that took root within him. What could it possibly have been? Well, let's look at some likely examples, given what we can extrapolate from his goals in the game. First up, Sulyvahn might have discovered the Profaned Capital and been entranced by the perversions he discovered there, and decided that he too must set himself up as a ruler. Perhaps he wished to be worshipped like Gwyndolin. Second of all, the more likely yet obtuse reason, Sulyvahn was inspired by the unfading flame of the Profaned Flame and sought to use it to his own means, whatever those might be. Does he have the same goal as Aldrich, or was he merely using Aldrich? For Sulyvahn made good use of Aldrich and the Profaned Flame both. The Fire Witches of Irithyll were once Holy Knights, perhaps even Dark Moon Knights, before their hearts were swallowed by the Profaned Flame. For Irithyll was at some point heavily associated with Gwyndolin and the Darkmoon Blades. Sulyvahn himself uses a rough approximation of the miracle Darkmoon Blade, only his is sorcery. A ceremonial sword held in Pontiff Sulyvahn's left hand, representing the judgment of the moon, but with magic far closer to sorcery than any existing lunar power. Its dark blue hues, deeper than the darkest moon, reflect the sorcerer Sulyvahn's true nature. The name itself is a clue, Sword of Judgment, and the Darkmoon Blades were ever those who mete out the god's judgment. And that description? In my mind, it is effectively telling us that Sulyvahn has created a sorcery imitation of Darkmoon Blade, perhaps to fool others, to maintain the illusion that he truly is a pope, a holy figure of the Darkmoon Blades. Perhaps he feigns Gwyndolин's blessing while secretly disposing of any who might oust him. Yorshka knows the truth, but is locked away. But even she does not know that Aldrich is steadily consuming the soul of Gwyndolin. And we know that Sulyvahn rules Irithyll with an iron fist. His knights roam the city, acting as his eyes and executioners as needed. Sulyvahn's atrocities extend to the royal family of gods beyond Gwyndolin too. The dancer of the Boreal Valley was a distant daughter of this same family, perhaps with some connection to Kieran, until Sulyvahn ordered her to serve first as a dancer and then later exiling her. A death sentence in Irithyll thanks to the eye rings bestowed upon all Outrider knights that eventually turned them into beasts. The creature we fight by the entrance to Irithyll, and then later we encounter two more of them below the city. Are these the beasts that Outrider knights will eventually become? It seems very possible to me. The dancer, however, wields paired swords that mirror Sulyvahn's, magic in the right hand, fire in the left. The blades are symbolic of her vows, but what might those be? To oppose Sulyvahn? That seems unlikely considering they were given her by Sulyvahn. Unless this was some strange twist of irony he found amusing. Unlike the dancer and the Outrider knights, however, Sulyvahn always intended for Aldrich to return to Irithyll, bestowing upon him the small doll, itself perhaps a nod to the original painted world that allows entry to Irithyll. Or at least, I am assuming that Sulyvahn is the one who gave Aldrich this doll. We don't know for certain. Sulyvahn certainly shows up a lot in Dark Souls 3, especially for a boss with no dialogue, not even a cinematic. How about his relationship with Aldrich? It is said that Aldrich was once a right and proper cleric. Perhaps it was the Profaned Flame and Sulyvahn's efforts that helped turn him into the cannibal monster we encounter in-game. Or perhaps not, as we truly know very little about Aldrich before he came a Lord of Cinta. There is a comic which portrays him as a sort of voodoo-esque character. I choose not to believe that is canon because it just seems so at odds with the rest of the game. But he and Sulyvahn certainly make a despicable pair, although a competent duo by all accounts. As far as villains go in the Souls franchise, Sulyvahn is quite the accomplished one, even bending the survivors of the Profaned Capital to his will to serve in his pointless jail. That all changed once the Ashen One arrived in the Moon City, however. And on that note, Anor Londo. Anor is the Elvish word for sun in Lord of the Rings. How about the moon? Well, it's only known as Irithyll. Irithyll and Irithyll, not that different if you ask me. Whilst Anor Londo was the city of the sun, Irithyll is most definitely the city of the moon, and wherever you go, the moon still sets in Irithyll.
I would speak to my brother of this, one day, of the shining new hope that joined our dear company. I speak of thee, of course.